Forget every heroic myth you've ever heard. Forget the noble last stands. Today, we're not talking about courage. We're talking about slaughter. We're descending into the true story of Masada, a remote desert fortress that became the stage for a nightmare almost too terrible to imagine. Just let those words sink in. These are the words supposedly spoken by the leader at Masada, Eleazar Ben-Yair, to convince his followers what had to be done. This isn't a rallying cry for glory. It is a portrait of pure, intimate terror. The choice he laid out was simple. Either you inflict this horror on your own family, or you can let the Romans do it. This is where our story truly begins.
So to really understand this nightmare, you have to understand the people at the center of it. You see, they weren't just victims waiting for the end. No, the historical record paints a much, much darker picture. Long before the Romans ever showed up, they were the villains of the story.
They were known as the Sicarii, the dagger men. And our main source for this whole event, the historian Josephus, he doesn't mince words. He doesn't call them rebels or freedom fighters. He uses terms like bandits, terrorists, and murderers. He wants to be absolutely clear from the get-go. These are not the heroes, they are the killers.
And here's the first truly chilling twist in this whole tale. You'd think their main enemy would be Rome, right? Nope. The Sicarii saved their most savage violence for their own people. They terrorized, assassinated, and burned the property of any fellow Jews who didn't fall in line. They weren't just a rebellion, they were a cancer on their own nation.
700. Just look at that number. With no context, it just feels heavy, doesn't it? It's a number that tells you everything you need to know about the monstrous nature of the men on top of Masada, long before a single Roman soldier even appeared on the horizon.
That number, 700, that's the body count. Before the siege even began, the Sicarii descended from their fortress and raided the peaceful Jewish village of 𝑰𝒂𝒂𝒉𝒕. During Passover, a holy festival, they butchered more than 700 people, mostly women and children. This wasn't an act of war. It was a straight-up atrocity. And these are our so-called defenders.
So you have a fortress full of killers, and then a new monster appears on the horizon. Not an army of men, not really. This was something else. An inhuman, unstoppable force of nature designed for one purpose: to grind that fortress and everyone in it into dust.
The numbers alone tell a horror story. Up on the rock, you've got fewer than 1,000 people, men, women, and children. And down below, 15,000 soldiers of the Roman 10th Legion. Think of it as the most efficient, brutal killing machine the ancient world had ever produced, ready to just erase them.
So, how do you attack a fortress on top of a mountain? Well, if you're the Romans, the answer is terrifyingly simple. You just build your own mountain. This ramp, this massive scar carved into the landscape, it's a monument to their insane, inhuman will. They didn't just fight their enemies. They remade the planet to kill them. And you can just imagine the people on top, watching day after day as this ramp crept towards them like some slow, unstoppable claw.
Now forget any story you've heard about a long, heroic, multi-year struggle. The archaeology tells a much faster and frankly more terrifying story. This wasn't a war, it was an extermination on a deadline. In just a couple of weeks, the fortress was totally sealed. A few weeks after that, the ramp was done. The whole thing was over in a matter of weeks. For the Sicarii, it must have felt like watching death itself assemble on your doorstep, piece by horrifying piece. The ramp is done. The Roman battering ram smashes through the wall. Victory is just hours away for the legions. But inside that fortress, as night begins to fall, the true horror is about to begin. The story Josephus tells us, it is one of absolute, unbelievable savagery. Josephus paints this picture of quiet, heartbreaking tenderness. A final hug, one last kiss for a child. It's the calm before a hurricane of blood. And it's this little moment of humanity that makes what happens next so impossibly monstrous.
And just like that, the switch flips. The tenderness vanishes. The tears are replaced by cold steel. The same men who had just kissed their families become their executioners.
And this wasn't some chaotic frenzy. No, this was a calculated atrocity, a procedure with cold clinical steps. First, every man kills his own family. Then, they draw lots, and 10 men are chosen to murder all the others. Then those 10 draw lots again, and one of them kills the other 9. And that last man, he walks through the palace, this charnel house he helped create, makes sure everyone is dead, sets it all on fire, and then falls on his own sword. a perfect, systematic self-annihilation.
Okay, now, I want you to imagine you're a Roman soldier. The sun is coming up, the fires from the night before are dying down. It's time. Time for the final assault. Time to claim your victory. So you pour through that broken wall, shield up, sword out, braced for screaming, for the chaos, for the blood of a final desperate battle. You are ready for hell.
But there's nothing. No screams, no clashing swords, just this deep, profound, unnatural silence. The only sound is the crackle of a few distant fires. You realize you haven't conquered a fortress. You've just inherited a giant, open tomb.
And that's when they find them. 960 bodies, piled in the palace, families still in their final embrace. The only people left alive are 2 women and 5 children who managed to hide in an underground water cistern. And when they finally emerge, they're the ones who tell the Romans this entire gruesome story. So there it is. The story is complete. A perfect, terrible, unforgettable tragedy. But this is where our horror story takes its final and most unsettling turn. Because the entire nightmare we just walked through, well, it might be a ghost itself.
I mean it. What if the systematic slaughter, the emotional speeches, the drawing of lots, what if none of it actually happened that way? What if the tidy story itself is the real monster here?
Remember those 7 survivors? They are the single source for this whole story, a story they told the Romans, which years later was written down by the historian Flavius Josephus, a man writing comfortably from a villa in Rome, a man who was never even there. He wasn't an eyewitness, he was a storyteller. And, you know, when you actually hold his perfect story up against the cold, hard facts of archaeology, the whole thing starts to fall apart. Josephus says there was one giant fire. Archaeologists find lots of small, scattered fires. He says they saved their food stores to make a point. Archaeologists found them burned. He claims the Romans just stopped and waited overnight right before their final attack, a move modern military experts call utterly incredible. He describes this perfectly ordered suicide, but skeletons were found in a cave, which looks a lot more like a desperate failed escape.
And that's pretty much the modern verdict. Not real history, but a farrago of fiction, conjecture, and error. What probably happened is Josephus took a kernel of truth. Some of the defenders almost certainly killed themselves, and then he embellished it. He borrowed from other famous stories to create a more dramatic, more memorable tale. He gave us a fantastic story, just not necessarily the true one.
And that, right there, that leaves us with the final, deepest horror of all. If Josephus's neat, tidy story of a mass suicide is a fabrication, a ghost, then what really happened on that mountaintop? Was it a chaotic, bloody last stand? Was it a brutal massacre by Roman soldiers who had no plans to take any prisoners? The truth is, we don't know. The story we thought we knew just evaporates, and it's replaced by a void. And the most terrifying thought of all is that the real horror of that night, lost forever to history, might have been so much worse than any story we could ever invent.